ventricular balance. This relates to cardiac output. So remember before we said that your right ventricle has a cardiac output into the pulmonary trunk. This blood then ends up going to the lungs to get oxygenated. So this is part of the pulmonary circuit. So here is your right ventricle pumping into the pulmonary trunk. This splits through the pulmonary arteries to go to the lungs. Then we have the left ventricle pumps its cardiac output into the aorta, which then goes out to your body. And we use the word systemic to refer to the whole body. So here's the left ventricle. It pumps into the aorta. That splits here to go to systemic capillaries. The top one represents systemic capillaries above your heart, so your head, your arms. The bottom one represents everything below your heart, your legs, the rest of your body. Remember also we said that ideally these two cardiac outputs are equal to each other. So an average healthy adult at rest, it should be 5.25 liters for the right and 5.25 liters for the left. That is a state of ventricular balance. So ventricular balance means that the cardiac output of the right and the left are equal to each other. So your right cardiac output equals your left cardiac output. And as long as you have ventricular balance, everything goes fine. But not everyone has ventricular balance. You can have problems with your heart in which you no longer have ventricular balance. The problems can be on the right or on the left. If you have damage or weakness, the muscle is weak on the right side of the heart, then it will have a lower cardiac output. It'll have a lower stroke volume and therefore a lower cardiac output. This will cause your right cardiac output to be less than your left cardiac output. So in this scenario, we're saying the left side of the heart is still doing good. It's doing fine. It's the right side of your heart that has a problem, and it has a lower stroke volume. So if the right side of the heart has a lower stroke volume, that means it's going to have a higher end systolic volume. So remember, this is the blood that's left in the heart after it has pumped blood into the artery. Because this side of the heart is having problems, less blood is pumped into the artery. So there is more blood left over in the ventricle after it has pumped. So now, as the veins are trying to fill the heart, there's more blood left there. So there's less room for the veins to put blood in. So the heart is more full after it beats. So this makes it hard for veins to put blood in. If you're leaving more blood in the heart after it pumps, then there's not room for the veins to put very much in. So this means you get kind of a traffic jam. You have all this blood here in the veins waiting to get in. This traffic jam backs up, right? Think about when you've been in a traffic jam. The traffic jam keeps backing up, and it backs up all the way to your systemic capillaries. Well, when you have this traffic jam of blood backed up, that creates pressure. You have more blood in these vessels, and the more blood you have in there, that's creating pressure. So you have pressure here. So this backup of blood creates pressure. And remember in chapter 18 lab, when I came to your lab table with the magnet and the little water molecules, and we talked about how capillaries have holes in them, they're permeable, and that you face a problem of the water wanting to fall out from those holes, but your plasma protein is what saves you? Well, if you get a lot of pressure here, that pressure can push water out, despite your plasma protein trying to hold on to it. So the pressure and the plasma protein kind of get in a tug of war over the water. And this higher pressure is able to push the water out of your capillaries. Even though your plasma protein is trying to hold on to it. The pressure is more powerful. Okay, so under this condition where you have this traffic jam of blood trying to get into the right side of the heart, that creates so much pressure that the pressure becomes more powerful than your plasma protein and water is pushed out. So you end up with water leaking out of these capillaries. And if you remember from when we talked about this in chapter 18, this is edema. So your body will swell. So you will get edema. And you'll especially see it like in the hands and the feet and the legs. So if you have heart disease or damage on the right side of your heart, you're going to end up with edema out in the body, out in the hands and feet and legs, because of that pressure created by the blood backing up, trying to get into the right side of the heart. Now let's look at the left side. Same concepts here, just in a different place. The left ventricle is pumping into the aorta, which goes out to the body. So let's say if you have damage or weakness on the left, then you're going to have less blood being pumped out into the systemic. So you're going to have a lower stroke volume on the left, and that lower stroke volume means you're going to have a higher end systolic volume on the left. Same idea as we just talked about. If less blood is being pumped out, more blood is left behind in the heart. So now you get a traffic jam of blood trying to get into the left side of the heart. Well, the blood coming into the left side of the heart is coming from the lungs. So now it's here in these pulmonary veins where you have the traffic jam, and you get that buildup, and that buildup goes all the way back to your pulmonary capillaries. And remember, this is going to create pressure, and that pressure is going to cause water to come out. So now we have pressure is going to push water out in the pulmonary capillaries. Well, this is in your lungs. So now, instead of getting edema, you get water in your lungs. The lungs will actually start to fill up with water. Well, if your lungs start to fill with water, you're going to have trouble breathing. You're going to get shortness of breath. Right? You're going to have this very uncomfortable drowning feeling. And so what happens is then people go to the doctor and they complain that they're having trouble breathing. And sometimes you might assume that it's a problem with your lungs. Makes sense. It's a problem with your lungs. You're having trouble breathing. And the doctor does an exam and says, oh, you have congestive heart failure. So sometimes people don't understand all this. They have trouble breathing. They go to the doctor says you have heart failure. And the person's like, no, you're not listening to me. I said it's my lungs that I'm having trouble with. I can't breathe. Well, this is the connection. Congestive heart failure is when you have damage on the left side of your heart. So you get this backup of blood coming from the lungs. That creates pressure in the pulmonary capillaries, which pushes water out, and the lungs start to fill with water, and you have trouble breathing. And if you leave this untreated, you could actually drown from the water filling up in your lungs. So the treatment for this is with diuretics. Like if you may have heard of Lasix. Lasix is a diuretic. It makes you urinate more so that you're pulling that water out. And in extreme cases, they might have to stick a tube down your nose into your lungs and suction the water out. And I actually know somebody who had congestive heart failure so bad that about once a week she had to go to the doctor and they had to stick a tube down and suction the water out of her lungs just so she didn't drown.